Hi, welcome to Voice Bootcamp, a global name in unified communication. My name is Faisal Khan, a Cisco collaboration instructor and founder of Voice Bootcamp. In this video, I'm going to show you how to prepare the servers for Cisco PCCE deployment or package UCCE deployment. Now, what you're seeing on the screen right now is basically an interface, web interface for your day-to-day administration of Cisco Unified Contact Center Enterprise. Now, this is a package solution where most of the deployment was basically automated using a script concept. Now, it seems like for the last, 3, 4, 5 years, Cisco is moving toward a direction where the web administration is becoming the de facto tools for many of the applications. Well, PCCE is basically a web-based administration, or call it single pane on glass, or SPOG. So I'm going to walk you through how to prepare the deployment. Now, chances are that most of you guys may not be involved in deployment. Maybe it was already done, but you need to understand how the backend component works, and I'm going to show you how to do that. Now, it is a tedious process. It is a very, very time-consuming if you don't follow the instructions. When I was learning, it took me anywhere between 10 to 25 attempts, depending on certain versions, to make it work. And the instructions on Cisco website sometimes are not clear enough about that. All right, so this is a ready-made system that we already have, but I'm going to show you how to build the servers from scratch. That means we're going to assume that you have Microsoft Windows 2000 server already installed, and Microsoft SQL Server database is already installed and customized. Now, obviously, we're not going to show you how to install SQL Server or Windows, and you can Google that or YouTube it, but I'm going to walk you through the setup. Now, what you need here is we're going to deploy this in a simplex concept. Okay, so it can be done duplex. So once you understand the simplex concept, duplex is just basically just adding more servers to your list. That's all. So what you have here is your my pod. I'm going to use pod number 4. I have a Logger A, I have a PGA, CVPA, CYC reporting, admin server, call manager, visual voice browser. Now we're going to configure pretty much all the Windows servers first, and then I'm going to show you how to run the installation setup. So let's quickly explore the Active Directory. Now you're going to need an Active Directory because everything in EPCC or UCC is still depending on Microsoft Active Directory for centralized repository. So let's take a look at what our Active Directory looks like. One thing you want to make sure that the password that you're going to use is not an easy password or the complexity is enabled, because what we realize that if your Windows policy is set to enable like an easy password, sometimes the installation has failed. So we had to turn on complexity on the password level, and then of course you have to change the password. Now, because you're going to need to create or select a UCCE account, a Windows service account that will be used to, let's say, create services or running services, stuff like that. So we're going to show you what that needs to be done. First of all, make sure that you have an Active Directory running and all the necessary configuration, time zone, and everything is set accordingly. So here's my Active Directory. It's pretty straightforward. The domain that I'm going to use called vbcpod4.com. And you also want to make sure that in your Active Directory, you have a DNS server properly configured for each one of your servers. So here you can see that I have a DNS server with my records that are required. Now you can always look at the documentation and find out what record that you need to create. Now I'll give you a tips. If you are doing a deployment of duplex, then you will probably have public and private interfaces. That means server will have at least 2 IP addresses. One that will be used for facing the customer, one that will be used for the database and server replication or health state replication. Now, regardless, even though we're not going to use the private subnet for customer data, or you may not even use the private subnet to access the server, but you do need a DNS record, a reverse pointer for that particular name. So what happened is your PCC deployment is going to take the private address and it's going to do a reverse lookup on your DNS server. Now I'm going to show you, even though we're not going to do a duplex, but I'm going to show you what I mean by that. So here you'll see that I have router A right there. That is my, oh sorry, not, that's the IPv6. Where's my router A? Right there. And that is the IP address of my router and a logger. So you'll see the IP address 151 with the host name configured, and the PTR record is checked. Now, what is important is that just by simply checking is not enough. Why? Because you do need a PTR record right here in a reverse lookup. If you're not familiar with what is DNS PTR record, I strongly recommend you to watch a YouTube video about DNS, Microsoft DNS specifically. So here you'll see that I have a record 451 right there, reverse DNS lookup entry is there. Now, like that, what you need a private subnet, which is right here, 192.14.64. So I use 142 as a public, 192 as a private. There you'll find the two IP addresses that I'm going to use for my DNS, for my private interfaces. Now, this is something that you need to configure only if you are going to deploy a production environment or if you're doing duplex. The fact that we're going to do simplex, not need to worry about that. All right, like that, you're going to have a PG, you're going to make sure you have a CVP, Router A, HDS server, as well as FINES, CYC reporting, and visual voice browser. All the entries should be there. Next thing I want to check out is my password complexity. So what you're going to do, you're going to go to Administrative Tools, and you're going to check the local security policy. So in the local security policy, under password policy right there, you're going to make sure that your password complexity is enabled. Okay. Again, this may not have may not be required, but this is something that we have experienced during that 25 trial or an error durations. So might as, and of course in production, remember, you're going to have to make sure that it is secure as possible. Another thing we're going to do, we're going to go and check the local policy user right assignment. Now there you'll see allow logon locally, and you'll see there I have configured, well, administrator as a part of it, which is by default anyway. So that is one thing you want to make sure. And next thing we're going to do is go to group policy management. Okay. Though you may not need to worry about this, but just in case, if you do, group policy will force all the servers that are member of this Active Directory to retain certain inherit certain policies. Now, what I have done in my default, under details, I have disabled them. Now, if you want to enforce it, you want to enable this so that all the policies are controlled from central locations. I'm just going to leave it as it is for now. All right, so Active Directory, the last thing we're going to do is check your username and password. So I have created a username called CCE admin. So simply copy the right click administrator account, copy for the lab purposes only. And you want to make sure that that user has a complex password. You will also see that he's a member of domain admin, because you need certain privilege to be able to create administrator account on those local member servers like Roger, PG, and admin servers. All right, so pretty much that's all we really need. Another thing, you want to double check and verify that your time and time zones are configured properly, because what will happen is, if in case, sometime when we deploy this in lab environment, we don't pay attention to time, in many cases. So later you realize that you change it, and a lot of things stop working, especially the certificates and security and all that stuff. So please make sure that time zone and time is currently set. I am in Eastern time zone right now in Toronto, Canada, and we do have, it is right now 10 a.m. almost. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is verify the configuration on the Router A, and you're going to log in either using a console or RDP, totally up to you. Now I'm going to log in with the username called CCE admin, which is coming from Active Directory. And again, two things I want to make sure, I'm going to verify here. I'm going to verify my account and security policies. So under local security right there, you want to make sure that your complexity is enabled. And yes, it is enabled. And you want to make sure the user right, you have logon locally, you have domain admin enabled for that, so that it gives the UCCE admin a privilege to create that service accounts. All right, you want to verify that you are logged in locally, you're logged in using domain, and one of the fastest way to verify is by going to command prompt and type the command who am I. This will tell you what user account that you're currently used to log into this server, and it should be the domain account. Okay, it cannot be local account. The last thing I want to verify on this server is your Microsoft Microsoft SQL Server. So you'll see that Microsoft SQL 2014 server is already installed. And we are going to make sure that this particular account that I'm using, UCCE admin, is able to log into your SQL Server. And if you're not, then you're going to have to step back, log into the SQL Server as a SA admin or a user with a privilege, and then make sure that you add the UCCE admin into it. Now, I'm not going to talk about the administration aspect of that SQL Server. It is not a Microsoft course, but we're going to assume that you already know. Now, here, I'm going to try to log in using the Windows authentication. And right now, the user that I'm logged in as is called vbcpod4/UCCE admin. And the password will be taken from the token or cache that is currently logged in as. So go ahead and connect. And if I am able to communicate, that means your SQL Server is configured properly. Now, there are certain things that you must do to install the SQL Server in a certain way. That's something that I strongly recommend that you look at the SQL EPCC installation guide. So what you are checking here is going to security, login, and you want to make sure that the UCCE VBC pod 4 UCCE admin user is already included. Also, the local administrator must also be included as well. If these two users are not included into your SQL Server, what will happen is when you try to install the UCCE software, the installation will fail to complete because these two items are going to be missing from your list. So make sure that that is the correct. Also, you want to make sure that SA user account is enabled and has a complex password as well. All right, so this is something that you need to do. You want to verify your IP addresses on this server. And as I say that I'm going to use simplex only. So therefore I don't need a private address. But if you're doing a duplex, you will need a private address as well. Now, this server does have a private address. I just disabled it. All right, so that part is done. I'm going to log into the PG. Same thing, you want to verify. Now, I've already done that for you guys, so I'm not going to repeat the whole thing in every server. I'm just going to log into them. Okay, so now all my servers I'm connected, Roger, PG, admin. These are the servers that I'm going to need your UCC software installed. So I'm going to go to Roger and I'm going to check this D drive. Now, I may not have anything on my D drive or the UCC software. So this is where we are going to go to our vCenter. This is where we use map the ISO file into the virtual machine. Oops. So we're going to mount the ISO 12.0 into the virtual machines. So you can go to Roger A, go to edit, and you're going to go to CD-ROM and you're going to change here, browse, corporate ISO, and we're going to choose a UCCE folder and we're going to choose a version 12.0. UCCE right there. So I will go ahead and do the same thing for PG. And finally the admin server. Now, since I'm here, I'm also going to mount the CD-ROM for CVP to the CVP software as well, so that we can finish the installation in one shot. So check the CVP right there. Now you need to understand that because we're doing this in lab environment, we're going to run the CVP call server and operation console in the same box. So there is a little trick that you must follow. So I'm going to choose ISO for CVP, and we're going to use CVP 12.0 as well. Okay, so all my servers currently has all the ISO mounted to it. So I'm just simply going to go to that Rogger A, and I'm going to start the installation for Rogger. Simply click on this D drive or your DVD-ROM. Go to that folder called ICM CCE installer, and you're going to go to the bottom of the page and click on Setup. This will give you the installation program for UCCE. Now, keep in mind that installation will depend on certain configuration that requires in advance, which I've shown you some of them, and some of them will be based on the documentation. So, but it will tell us if there's something missing, and this is the good thing about this program. So, welcome screen, and it's going to do a check if there's anything missing. So, if you see this sign, that means everything met the requirement. At this stage, you have a choice to install a fresh install or technology upgrade. Now, technology upgrade, of course, if you're upgrading from previous version, but because we're doing for the fresh, we're going to select the fresh install. Now, next is going to check location. Location is if you do have any sort of maintenance release, like 12.5, which is a maintenance release, and you have obtained from the Cisco, you can download that and then simply select that file, and it will execute it after the initial installation. So basically, you're upgrading to version 12.5. Okay, I'm going to keep everything set. It's going to be C drive. It's going to secure the SQL Server a little bit more, and we're going to click on installation. It takes about anywhere between 10 to 15 minutes or 20 minutes depending on your server performance. All right, so this is in process. So let's go and do the same thing for my CVPG. So far everything looks good. I'm just simply go ahead, next, next, and next. All right, so let this one run, and last will be admin server. And we're gonna do the same thing. Again, we're right now only in setting up the base software. We're not really actually defining the role right now. Just simply select making the server capable of running as a different component of the UCCE. So they all will have the same software installed primarily. Okay, so we are almost done with the UCC component, and I'm going to double check the Rogger. I'm going to double check the PG, still in process, and I'm going to check the make sure that it is initiated. So while we're waiting for these 3 servers to complete, let's go to CVP and see if we are ready to install the CVP server. So as you can see, I'm not able to communicate with the CVP, so I want to double check on my server, make sure that I can, and it currently has a wrong IP address. That's probably why. So I'm going to fix that problem. I'm going to join the domain and then reboot the server, and then we'll be able to continue with our CVP installation. Now, CVP does not require any sort of any SQL Server database unless you're doing the reporting, which we're not at this moment. I'm just going to simply change the domain and the IP address and reboot the server. We have about 350 virtual machines running in our environment, so sometimes this IP address mismatch is a very common problem for us. Okay, so first thing first, I'm going to remove this to local work group because it was in pod. So I'm going to remove it to work group, change the IP, then join back the domain, reboot the server. Okay, so server is rebooting. Oh, so not rebooting. We changed that. Reboot later. Change the IP. Now, CVP, one thing is very, very important, that the server cannot have dual network card. Okay, so this is something that you have to be very careful. Otherwise, CVP services will not work. So we're gonna make sure all the IP addresses are the same, and soon you'll see on the left right hand side, yeah, network word comes up. That's a good sign. That means there's a network communication. And now what we're gonna do, we're gonna make sure that RDP is enabled. Yep. And then we're gonna change it back to right domain. Okay, so I entered the wrong password. So welcome to VBC part 4. I'm going to go ahead now, reboot the server, and once it's rebooted, we are ready to install. Again, make sure you are logged in as a domain when you do the installation. It is very important that all the secure permissions are set, same for across all the servers. Okay, so I'm going to check to try to log in from right here from my RDP sessions. So it will give me the prompt for the username and password. I will try to log in using that domain and then run the installation program. All right, so I'm going to go and install the CVP directly from the server. Now, you could literally go to the D drive and click setup. However, because we are running this installation in a lab environment, I want to install the call server and the operation console into the same server. Now, to be able to do that, what you need to do is go to the run and add a switch to your setup program. So I'm going to go to the D drive first. And you'll go to CVP installer setup. Now when you select that, at the end of this exe, you just type lab only. This will give you a switch to select multiple components to be able to run on a single machine. Which is which is only supported in a training and a lab environment, not in production. All right, so it's pretty much a normal installation. You just simply answer a few questions and you're ready to go. It takes about a few minutes to install the application. Now, once this application is done, we're going to verify the UCC component to make sure that they are up and running, or at least they have been successfully installed. So while we are waiting for this, let's go back to Roger. It's going to asking for us to reboot the server. So installation has succeeded. So I'll go ahead and reboot all my 3 UCCE component server while I finish the CVP installation. So CVP will accept the agreement. You select the CVP and operation console. So CVP will include the call server, the VXML, and all the other services that you need. And operation console, of course, is your management or OMP. So I'm going to stick to default Kodak. These are the default folder. If you already have a CVP folder, please delete that. Otherwise, it will not work. Now, common name, we're going to say VoiceBootcamp, unit training, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, and email address will be info@voicebootcamp.com. Now, this will be mostly for self-certification. All right, so we are pretty much almost there. Once this installation is done, we should be able to verify and make sure that components are running, and we'll be then ready to go to the next step of deploying the PCC script. So I'm waiting for the Roger, PG, and the admin server to come back while we wait for the PG to CVP to complete. So I'm going to pause the video and I'm going to come back once they are ready to. Okay, so while the CVP is still installing, this is my Rogger, and as you can see on the left hand side, it has created the setup program as needed on both PG, all three, and admin server. All these three servers should have these information right there. Okay, now before we go ahead and do the ECC installation, PCC installation, there's one more thing that I have to do to both Rogger and the admin server. So pay attention to that. Okay, so in the Rogger, when we created this virtual machine using the golden template from Cisco, it created the virtual machine for Rogger. However, in order to install PCCE, you must have two hard drives on the Rogger and the admin server, both side A and side B. But because we are doing simplex, we're going to only going to use it side A. So what you're going to do, you're going to go to the edit settings. Now this is something that the template doesn't do for you. So you're going to have to add a hard disk number 2. So it's very important. The hard disk 1 on the server side will be shown as hard disk 0, whereas hard disk 2 on the VMware is equivalent to hard disk number 1 on the operating system side. So if you're not sure how to add a hard drive, simply click on add new device and select hard disk. So I have selected hard disk for 150 gigabit for Rogger, and likewise I have done the same thing for admin server. Now this second hard disk is basically used to host the SQL Server database, and it has to be a drive has to be assigned to it, which is letter E, because otherwise the PCC installation will fail. So the AWS has to be 500 GB, or make sure if you're in a lab environment, please make sure it's a thin provision so that you do not end up wasting spaces for nothing. Okay, so I'm going to verify that, and while I am on my Rogger, everything is ready. What I will do is I need to format that hard drive. So one thing you want to make sure that there is no E drive in your system. Now, as you can see, there are E drive which will cause problem. So what I will do, I will log out from here. I will close this session and go to the server from the web console, VMware console. When I use my RDP, it mapped my local PC's drive with server so that I can copy files properly. Alright, so I'm going to go to, so here is my server. I'm going to log in directly from here, console. And you want to go to computer management or disk management. So you can go to disk management. You'll see that there's a disk number 1. So you want to right click, click online, and then right click, go to initialize disk. So just click OK, accept the default. And once you're done, you're going to now create a simple volume. Now I'm just going to call it data volume. Just keep the full space, and it has to be E drive. This is very important. I'm going to call this data. This is where the SQL Server will be installed. No, sorry, the database will be installed. SQL Server is already installed. All right, I'm done with my Rogger A. I'm going to do the same thing with a Rogger B. Sorry, AWS. No, there's no Rogger B in my lab. Okay, so we're going to go to my computer disk management. And follow the same procedure. Okay, so this is done right away, and if you go to your E drive, you'll see that there is C drive, there's E drive, where data. All right, so we are now pretty much ready. So now we're gonna make sure that CVP installation is completed and then reboot the server. I want to check the web, make sure the web console comes online, and then we will go to the next lab. All right, so last stage of my installation of CVP is to define the password. So I will use the regular password that we use, and ready to reboot the server. So right now your CVP installation is done. Typically you would reboot the server, log into the OMP to make sure that the OMP services are working, and that's pretty much it for your ECC based installation. So that's where I'm going to stop in this video, and in the next video I'm going to show you how to prepare PCC deployment by going through certain steps, and we're going to actually complete the PCC deployment in our simplex environment. I hope you found this video to be useful, and will save you hours of research if you're doing this for the first time. Thank you very much.